Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 204. The guest for this week is an old friend of mine, one of the absolute best guys in both the fitness industry and the baseball industry. I've had a chance to do some clinics with him back in the day, and he's just a good family friend. We spent some awesome time around him and his wife and kids, and they're some of the most endearing people you'll meet. He's also an excellent resource with respect to not just baseball development, but more specifically the catching position. I've enjoyed my conversation with him over the years. He's got some cool researchers on that front. And what I love is we've had Tanner Swanson, we've had Jerry Weinstein, we've had Craig Alvarez, all on this podcast in the past to talk about catching development. But those conversations definitely trended towards the professional and collegiate ranks. I think today we get to dig in a lot more on how to develop youth catchers. So I think it's going to be a really good episode, for players, parents, and coaches alike. So we're in for a good one. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition habit on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest is the founder and owner of Paradigm Sport in Santa Cruz, California, where he has dedicated his career to developing athletes at every level. A former college and professional baseball player, he played at the University of Louisiana at Monroe before being drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. His aptitude in the specific skill sets as well as the strength and conditioning aspects of the game provide him with a unique perspective from which to work his clients on multiple levels. After his playing career, he transitioned into coaching and training, working with athletes across multiple sports, including a WSL Rookie of the Year, a UFC champion, a Red Bull Rampage bronze medalist. While his expertise spans a broad range of elite athletes, his true passion lies in training baseball players. Over the years, he's worked with thousands of youth players, hundreds of high school and college athletes, and dozens of professionals, including major leaguers Stephen Kwan, Mitch Haniger, Robbie Erlin, and Nick York. His coaching philosophy is rooted in building well-rounded, high-performing athletes by combining technical skill development with strength, conditioning, and the mental and strategic aspects of the game. Through Paradigm Sport, he continues to shape the next generation of baseball players, helping them to reach their full potential on and off the field. In addition to his in-person training, he launched Players Paradigm, an online baseball development platform designed to provide players with high-level coaching and structured training programs no matter where they are. The goal of Players Paradigm is to bridge the gap between in-person coaching and remote development, offering athletes access to elite instruction on skill work, strength conditioning, and game strategy. As part of this initiative, he's launched his first online course, The Complete Catcher, a comprehensive training program covering all aspects of the catching position. Through this platform, he aims to empower baseball players at all levels with the tools they need to maximize their performance and take their game to the next level. Please welcome to the show, Joey Wolfe. Joey, this is incredibly overdue. Good to see you, buddy.
It's good to see you too, man.
Thanks for taking out the time. I'm super excited about this, and I even talked about this just on the intro. But we've had Jerry Weinstein, we have Tanner Swanson, we have Craig Alberna, some really bright guys. Jose Trevino has been on here, Platinum Glove winner. Guys that have been there, done that at with respect to catching. But I think we've almost accidentally trended too much towards like the college and pro level catcher, and I think we got to give some love to to the youth catchers because we both know like there's never enough catchers out there. So hopefully we can inspire some of the catchers of tomorrow tonight.
Yeah, no, that's my goal. I mean, all those names you listed, those guys are all amazing. I've heard most of them speak, and they're a wealth of knowledge. And I think I have Jerry's book behind me, so the guy's a legend.
I love it. So let's first talk about this. I know Joey as a fitness professional. I never knew Joey as a player, kind of before that. We've had stories, and things like that you've shared with me. But talk about what was your path to coaching? How did you wind up in the strength and conditioning and baseball development world?
So after my playing career was over, I never knew what I wanted to do. Like I never thought about it. I would be on buses in the minor leagues, think like what it's like. Well, I don't need to think about it. But my career kind of ended abruptly, and I think I drove home from Lansing, Michigan, got home on like a Saturday morning, and my parents owned a contract manufacturing business at the time, and my dad's like, "Hey, we want you to work on Monday." So I never really got that time to like reflect and think about what do I want to do the rest of my life. And I'd worked there for about a year, and then I have two older brothers. My one of them played at University of Kentucky, and then I have a younger sister, and we all worked there. And my oldest brother Vince ended up getting diagnosed with a brain tumor. He is actually coincidentally the same exact brain tumor that my father-in-law got diagnosed with 6 years prior. And at the time, Vince was 29, and then less than a year, a little more than a year later, he ended up passing away at age 30. He had three kids. The oldest now is, I think, 24. And so going through that whole kind of retiring from baseball, something been doing my whole life, and then my brother, who I was very close with, passing away at such a young age, it got me to really reflect on like what is it that I do want to do. I was kind of forced because I knew I didn't want to work for my dad's business anymore. It was just it wasn't anything that I was passionate about. And um so unbeknownst to me, it was kind of a two-part because like you said, I also do the fitness side. So
Mhm.
unbeknownst to me, one of my best friend's brothers worked at Google as a trainer, and he mentioned to his boss like, "Hey, I got a guy. He works really hard and he's really fit, and I bet he'd be a great trainer." And so I ended up starting my kind of my fitness journey working at Google in 2008, and then right around that time, somebody called me and he's like, "Hey, I want you to come out and watch our little league team. Like, I want you to see my son." And at the time, I wasn't in the headspace still because of my brother, and maybe a couple months later, he just kind of kept hounding me on it, and then eventually I went out there and I realized how much I missed it, how much I
Mhm.
missed being around the game, and so I started off, doing lessons and doing, doing some training, and then did that for about 4 years. That was kind of right around the time we met.
Yeah,
And I've really just kind of taken it in. And now we're running a travel ball organization. Yeah, I own my own gym. We're doing camp. We've been doing camps for like the last 15 years. So
yeah.
it's been quite a journey, but I don't know that I ever would have really gotten there had Vince not passed away when he did it. That was obviously a life altering thing that happened to me, and I think some good came out of it though for sure.
That's a fascinating story. I've never heard that before in all of our dealings, so it's good to know. So obviously we're going to talk catching today,
Mhm.
and I think we can both agree the catching position's evolved a ton year to year, right? Like, and it's probably still evolving as we talk about automated strike zone potentially coming, and the challenges being worked into spring training this year and all that. But talk about how catching, the position has evolved since you played.
Well, so I was drafted in 2003 and I got done in 2005. So we're talking, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
The biggest thing that I see is just technology, right? So they're able to tell whether a catcher is helping teams win games or lose games. And I think there was always an emphasis on receiving because, in the course of a 9 inning game, you're going to catch anywhere from 150 to 200 pitches. So you have a lot of influence on that, but now they know that. And so So I think, I don't know, I always credit Tanner for this. I don't know if he was the one that brought it into the game, but the knee down stance is probably the biggest thing
Yeah.
that I've seen change since I played. Because I mean, Tony Payne used to do it back in the day, but he was
Mhm.
really the only one that did it. So and the reason they do it, I feel like when I work with kids, a lot of them don't know why
Mhm.
catchers do that. They just do it because they do it on TV.
Yeah.
And really, it's to steal that low strike.
Mhm.
It's such an important, as a catcher or even as a coach, a pitcher, we're trying to work down in the zone to get ground balls, and I think that has really changed the game a lot. And for me as a catcher, that kind of pitch on the left side, so like a nasty slider from a lefty or a nasty two seamer from a right hander, like that ball that's running to my left side, that pitch was always really hard to catch. And I feel like with that left knee down, it really frees you up to
Mhm.
receive the ball better. So I think the big thing is that the technology, and then now with they're not giving signs anymore. It's
Mhm.
all through pitch comms. So I
Yeah.
think that's a big one that has changed the game as well. But it's fascinating. Baseball just as a whole has changed so much in the last
Yeah.
10 years. Mostly for the good. Some historians or some, purists would say it's not so great. But as far as catching goes, I was not a firm believer in the knee down at first, just because it's like, how do you move from here?
Yeah.
But the more I do it, the more I work with kids, it does make sense to me. And I guess the other thing I'd say that's changed a lot is receiving.
Mhm.
When I used to catch, or when I would teach catching early on, we would always talk about, sticking the ball. So if you
Yeah.
catch a ball, you stick that ball where it is. And now there's so much manipulation going on.
Yeah.
We're in the Bay Area, Northern California. So Patrick Bailey is
Yeah.
a fun one to watch. He's such an amazing receiver. And if you watch the way he's able to do that, but I remember when I first started saying, like, this is ridiculous. This looks like watching the Little League World Series when kids are like try to frame the ball. But the more you start to understand it, it does actually make sense. And if they do it right, it's not like that at all. I mean, they are moving the ball, and it's very hard to see it when they do it right.
Absolutely. And and Tanner will love it if I shout out, like, just so everyone knows, like, you can still block, you can still throw from the one knee down. People totally overlook the fact that every bit of data suggests that, if you get good at it, it's actually probably much more effective than the traditional stance. But what I think gets overlooked a lot is just how much easier it is on guys. Like, I mean, I'm like you. I had my own episode. I caught a lot of bullpens, for various points. I got my thumb blown up. Like, I look back and I'm like, why did I never just actually, figure out one knee down myself? It's a lot less demanding on the catcher's body.
It does. It definitely saves the legs. When I'm working with kids, because I've heard Jerry talk about that with and Tanner when he was on
Mhm.
here, about blocking. I can't imagine blocking with a knee down. Like, honestly, like, I feel
Yeah,
it. But I also think you got to look at like the level, right? So
yeah,
at the major league level, at the professional level, guys probably aren't spraying the ball all over the place the
yeah.
way they are in youth baseball. And so to move laterally, it is hard. But I was listening to somebody, I can't remember who it was, but he's talking about, like, at the high school level, like 80% or 85% of the balls that are thrown in the dirt are kind of in that catcher's box area. So it's
Mhm.
easy to kind of manipulate your body and keep it in front. But um, I can't imagine being someone that was able to move, just because I felt like when my knee got down, I got stuck.
Mhm.
But so I guess my point is, when I work with kids, I normally have them start from what I call like a traditional secondary.
Mhm.
And then as they get older and get more athletic, and I feel like they can move their body and control their body, then I'm like, okay, now we need to be able to do
Mhm.
all of it. We need to be able to get down
Yeah.
with our right knee down, our left knee down. You're gonna probably get down with your right knee down with runners on base. So they just need to learn to do all of it. But I don't necessarily start there. I feel like it's
Mhm.
important to start them, from a traditional stance, and then kind of work from there.
Absolutely. I think it's overlooked, like, what a massive, difference maker it is to have a good catcher in high school baseball. Really any level of baseball, but like in high school, like, if you want to win games, put the ball in play, run the bases aggressively, have a pitcher that throws strikes, and have a catcher that can receive, throw guys out, not let balls get to the backstop every other pitch. It's a massive competitive advantage.
Well, I deal with that now. So I have a 12-year-old, and I've been
Mhm.
coaching him since he was, young, like even younger than that. And so as the diamond gets bigger, right? So he went
Yeah.
from the lead distance of 46-60. Last year he was 50-70. Now he's moving up to 54-80. And for a lot of guys, they're just not strong enough to make that throw. So
Mhm.
any walk, any hit by pitch, any single, that's
Double.
automatically becomes a double.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that to controlling the running game is so important. Starting at that age, and like you said, up through high school.
What aspects of the catching position do you see young catchers struggle the most? Where are the biggest challenges?
Depends on the age. I'd say like early on, just like I mean, I work with my 8-year-olds and up
Yeah.
to, high school and college, but I think the number one is just catching the ball. I see a lot of really young kids, they can't comfortably get down into a stance. So that's why
Mhm.
this knee down stance works really well. I actually had a call with Jerry a couple months ago, and he was talking about just positionally, it allows the kids to get more stable
Mhm.
in their receiving stance. So I think at a very young age, I feel like kids really struggle just to get in position to just
Mhm.
catch the ball, because the most important thing is to be comfortable. Once they're able to do that, I feel like the receiving does become challenging, just their ability to kind of to get to the ball before it gets there. And then as they get older, they're able to do that. Throwing becomes challenging. Like I said, the fields get bigger.
Mhm.
Some don't have the arm strength for it, so they got to kind of break that up. And then I think most catchers, but not all, that blocking is kind of the last thing to
Yeah.
come. I think that it's so challenging because it's natural for kids to want to flinch
Yeah.
instead of actually go down and get into a blocking position. So you're kind of fighting against human nature. So I think there's kind of this progression. And I was working with, actually, we had a coaches clinic yesterday, and we had a bunch of parents there that are working with kids ages 6 to 12, and they're like, we don't have any catchers on our, and it's like, hey, just have all the kids get down and squat, whichever one looks the most
Efficiently.
comfortable, then you start kind of work with that kid to get them to go. But I feel like once you get into catching, man, it's hard to go to anything else. Once
Mhm.
I started doing it, I'm a bit ADD, so I can't imagine just sitting in the outfield and stewing on my last at bat,
Mhm.
waiting for my next one. So I mean, you're involved in every play, so you have to be present, you have to be in the moment. There's so much action going on, and so when you get around kids that have a lot of energy, they kind
Yeah.
of naturally gravitate towards that catching position.
Most underappreciated position in probably all of sports, if you really think about it. I mean,
I agree. I mean, what I love about it is there's so many facets to it. I mean, we're talking about
yeah,
receiving, blocking, throwing, fielding bunts, catching pop-ups, tag, like there's
game
so
calling,
many.
all of it. Yeah.
And then also the most important thing is the relationship that you have with
Yeah.
your pitchers, in controlling a game, calling a game, reading hitter swings. So there's a lot to it. I think it's oftentimes why you see at the higher levels,
Mhm.
there aren't a lot of great, offensive catchers. There's
Yeah.
just so much that goes into the defensive position of catching that it's hard to check all those boxes.
On that defensive front, like, I think it depends on who you ask. I think right now everybody agrees like the bat is still the most important, but a close second is going to be receiving, right? It's the most important skill for a catcher, at least defensively. What are the biggest mistakes young catchers make and on the receiving front? And then what are some things that you're doing to correct them?
I just think that a lot of young catchers, they get to the ball too late. So the term I always use is beat the ball to the spot. So
Mhm.
you've got to get your mitt to wherever the ball's going before the ball gets there. That way you're able to kind of, what I kind of call it, like funneling it back towards the middle. So if the ball's on the outside
Mhm.
part to a right hitter, you got to get around that ball before the ball gets there. Otherwise you're kind of pushing the ball. And I think one of the challenge with we kind of talked about how the positions changed. I think that kids are trying to manipulate or frame the ball more before they even can catch the ball
Yeah.
the right way. And I always, I think about when my kids learned how to ride their bike. We started off on one of those striders where they,
Yeah.
pedals, and then we got them on a training wheel bike, and then we got them on an actual bike. And I think I take that same kind of approach to catchers that are just starting out. It's like, look, we got to get really good at catching the ball first. So what I like to do is I like to just get it. I get maybe like 20, 30 feet away from them, and I'll just get on a knee and I'll just flip them tennis balls. And I'll just have them catch with their bare hand. And I think that tennis balls are really good because they're soft enough to where if you have hard hands, the
Yeah.
ball's going to bounce off your hand. And it's soft, so it's not going to hurt their hands. So I love to do a lot of bare hand receiving. And what we work on a lot is just, hey, let's beat the ball to the spot and let's stick it there. And then as they progress and they can do that, then we start working on kind of ball manipulation. But one of the things I like to do, I don't think they make it anymore, but I have like a coach's eye app, so where you can kind of freeze it and draw circles
Yeah.
and do. And so I'll do it. I'll pause it right where when they catch the ball, and I'll say, okay, look, on this next frame, like let's see if the ball is moving out of that circle. And if they can stick the ball there, then it's like, okay, you're ready. Because a baseball weighs 5 ounces. And if you're
Mhm.
working with like a 12-year-old who's catching a 60-mile-an-hour pitch, like that ball's going to move their mitt a lot. So I
Yeah.
want to make sure that they can control the mitt as and control the ball instead of letting the ball push them out. And then once they can do that, then it's like, okay, now we can really start working on what you're seeing on TV when the catchers are manipulating the ball. That process could
Yeah.
take, it could take a couple of years.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting you say this. Like I heard somebody say, and I can't remember who it was, like that, a high school catcher is the riskiest draft pick there is. We've always heard like high school arms don't work out, but like taking a high school kid, high in the draft is just scary for a lot of people because there are, as you probably just described, there are so many elements to success, right? It's not just the five tools. There's many more layers to it. So I'm curious, and this maybe layers on top of your analogy of like teaching your kids to ride the bikes, but like when you have a catcher that's making these progressions from 12 to 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way to 18, like are there developmental checkpoints, like key technical stages that they need to master at each level?
Yeah, and yeah, kind of like I alluded to earlier, to me, it kind of almost goes in that order. So when we're talking really young, it's getting comfortable in your stances, and then the next challenge, kind of the big rock that we need to uncover is like receiving. Once they
Yeah.
do that, it's like, okay, now, and obviously you're working all this stuff,
Yeah.
in conjunction, but then after that it becomes throwing and then the blocking. So yeah, I mean, I think part of what may make it hard. I mean, if you think about that jump from, I mean, high school baseball is totally different now than it was
Yeah.
20 years ago. But I mean, if you were catching a guy throwing 90 in high school back in the
Yeah.
day, that's hard.
Yeah.
Now you got maybe one or two guys in your area, Florida, maybe in
Yeah.
California, throwing 95. But when you get to pro ball, like all those guys are
Yeah.
throwing that hard. And so a catcher's gonna have to be really good. And not only that, there's movement on the ball. And I think that's one of the hardest kind of skills that kids need to develop is learning how to do that. I remember my freshman year at Fresno State, I'm catching a guy throwing like an 85-mile-an-hour slider. Like I'd never seen
Yeah.
anything like that. So that's a big jump. And so one of the best things that I ever learned as a catcher, and I still do it with all of our players, is just crank a machine up.
Yeah.
You get a hack attack and put that thing up pretty fast and have them work on receiving velo pitches because that's going to get them more comfortable doing that than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being playing pro ball right after high school. I mean, the pitching, the jump from high school to pro ball pitching, it's like night and day.
Yeah, we have a lot of high school kids that'll jump in and catch our pro guys, and I mean, don't get me wrong, they get their butts handed to them, but developmentally, like if you can handle, big league sliders in January when they're trying to iron out the kinks and they're going 57 feet, like you can catch just about everything, especially in the era of pitch design. Like guys are always coming up with something new, it seems like every day.
Right.
But you kind of hinted at like, all right, these are competencies we need, but I think we both know from our strength and conditioning backgrounds, like sometimes the technical competencies are predicated on a foundation of physical development. So,
100%.
if you're trying to build your ideal catcher, 18-year-old, high school senior that's headed off to take on the world, like what are some movement athletic qualities that you think are needing to be prioritized to get to that point?
So obviously to me it's lower body strength, but you don't want to do it in a vacuum. I mean, obviously you've written millions of programs, I've written tons of programs like so we're going to mix in like mobility work with our strength stuff. So any kind of sometimes where I think a lot of guys get stuck is in their ankles and their hips. If they can't move through those areas, those joints, they're really going to struggle. So but yeah, most high school kids that we work with, they're just undersized, under strength. So I think that building a strong base with their legs, obviously having a strong core, is gonna help a lot. But what I see happen a lot is just kids just not having the lower body strength to be
Mhm.
able to play at that next level. And it's funny when we do get guys that kind of move on and go to college. You kind of warn them. You tell them, hey, like when you get to the fall, like it's like you're full go. It feels like you're like
Mhm.
in season. And every time they come back for that winter break, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't expect that." It's like, man, we tried to tell you. So I just think that a lot of kids aren't prepared physically for the demands of playing at that next level. And I mean, that's
Yeah,
our job to get them there,
yeah.
but
You never know
sometimes
until you experience it.
yeah,
Yeah, we
exactly.
can tell them all the stories we want, but they never know
Right,
until they go through that first semester. So
right.
one of the things that I think is fascinating about the catching position is like you would think, hey, these guys spend hours upon hours in a deep squat position on a daily basis, and yet some of them they'll have very aberrant movement patterns. They'll lose a ton of hip ER and IR. They'll lose hip flexion. They'll be really banged up, and I think that's probably why so many of them have done well with the one knee down is it's less demanding on mobility. Like you don't need as much to make it work. But the thing I always have emphasized to folks, I'm curious if you agree, it's like, hey, it's way easier to do a little bit of mobility work and preserve it than it is
Right.
to lose it and try to get it back. Like trying to find a whole bunch of movement capacity in a 23-year-old catcher who just has never taken mobility seriously, like it's a lot of work to
Right.
to undo that.
So yeah, so what we do is very similar to what you guys do. I mean, they do all their soft tissue work. We'll usually
Mhm.
do some sort of active isolated stretching beforehand. And then we will do a lot of corrective exercises kind of mixed in with their warm up.
Mhm.
And then they're doing more mobility work as like kind of a filler in their
Mhm.
strength training stuff. But like you said it, like if you don't use it, you lose it. And
Yeah,
it's a lot harder to get back than it is just to preserve it. And so I just think that I guess that honestly, Eric, and you know this because you do this like every day. Like I think that the hardest part is just these kids are young, and I was
Mhm.
probably the same way. Like you just think that it's going to be like this forever,
Yeah,
and it's not. And then they start to realize, even with our like major league rookies and our veterans, like I see a difference in the way they approach it
yeah,
because the rookies just don't know they can kind of get away with it because they're so
yeah.
young. Over time, it catches up with all of us. So I think just that preparation and making your mobility and your flexibility part of your routine is critical.
Absolutely. On the strength training side of things, obviously you mentioned that, building some strength is pretty low hanging fruit for that, 15 to 18-year-old catcher that wants to play college baseball. And, that training program is obviously going to evolve from, maybe it's once or twice a week when they're 11 or 12, and then it gets more and more serious. I'm curious, where do you stand on contraindications? Because a lot of people say, hey, don't squat catchers, don't do this, don't do that. Like, are there certain things that you stay away from, or is it full go for just about everybody with everything?
No, we squat our catchers for
Yeah.
sure. We do a lot of deadlifts, a lot of squatting. When I listened to Boyle on here, it was like what 6 months ago or something like that. He was talking about his kids and how at age what I think he said 12 or
A-
sixth grade or something like
Age
that.
11 on 2 lifts per
Yeah,
week. So
and I
basically 700 of them over the course of, those 7 years.
Yeah, and so I think that's important. I think so with the younger kids, I think that we really focus on kind of movement quality,
Yeah.
just getting comfortable moving properly. We don't load them up a ton. We're just we're doing basic stuff like goblet squats and TRX rows and stuff like that. But as they kind of progress, like I like to see our guys in there a minimum of 2 times a week.
Yeah.
I think that's the real challenge is that the kids are doing a lot. We were just talking before
Yeah.
we started this thing. There's just kids are hopefully they're playing other sports and
Yeah.
doing other things, but even if they're not, they're playing travel ball and they're playing on two teams. And it's
Yeah.
just they kind of prioritize the playing side more than the training side. And I think that I've always had this challenge ever since we opened was just
Mhm.
like you need like the training needs to be your base. But to your question, no, we definitely squat our catchers. I mean, and obviously there's exceptions depending on people. If people are dealing with some hip pain or knee pain, then we'll modify. But there's nothing that we try to limit from a training standpoint with catchers.
I like that. I mean, especially young ones, give them exposure to a wide variety of activities, and they might not just be catchers. They might be, football players, basketball players, whatever it may be.
Right.
And you kind of hinted at, but like it can be hard. There's limited hours in the week. Guys are getting pulled in a lot of different directions. So you're trying to balance the skill work with their strength training. How do you recommend that the two are integrated? Do you try to combine sessions at times where, guys will do a little bit of skill work right before they work out? Do you attack them completely different? What's your best approach?
Yeah, the way we have it set up, I mean, there's probably the best approach, and then like what's practical for these
Yeah.
parents, right? Because traffic patterns in Santa Cruz aren't the best. So normally we'll have them, they'll come in and they'll do their hitting or their pitching for an hour, and
Mhm.
then they jump right in their
Yeah.
training. But honestly, I was listening today about your podcast about stress management with
Yeah.
pitchers. Like it's probably not a bad. I probably even if they're even in a perfect world, I probably would do that. It's just because they're there. It gives them opportunity to kind of recover and do what they
Yeah.
need to do the other days. But to me, in a perfect world, like with these kids, like so for our middle school kids, we're having them come in twice a week. They're hitting one day, they're throwing another day, and then they're lifting both days. And they're in season right now. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a good amount of volume for them.
Yeah.
As they get to high school, and I actually like to hear what you say. You know this better than I do, but I think in high school, kids should be probably training 3 days a week, probably total
Mhm.
body. I don't think that's any different with catchers. I may lay off the legs a bit
Mhm.
in season, depending on how
Yeah.
many games they're playing. You taught me just to stay away from eccentric work to get rid
Yeah.
of the stress and them getting sore. But I think that with the middle school kids, twice a week would be good. And then
Mhm.
on the same day they're doing their skill work, and with the high school kids, they're pretty much doing something on the field at least 5 days a week. But if they
Yeah.
can get in and do lifting 3 days a week, I think that's probably a pretty good schedule to hit.
I think so too. And catching's tough just because the amount of work you have receiving, it's just a different kind of fatigue, right? Like we
Right.
always talk about, like people roll their eyes when they hear about catchers that spend too much time in the cages working on their own hitting and not enough receiving and working with the pitchers and all that stuff. But guys got to get there. I know our pro catchers, facility opens up at 8:30, like they're in the cages at 8, getting their work in before the day goes. Like they most of them beat me to the facility after I drop my daughters off at school just because they have to get warmed up that quickly to go and get it in because they're kind of at the mercy of the pitchers. And first bullpen's 9 a.m. They got to get their stuff going beforehand. And it sounds terrible to say, but hitting and training are always kind of secondary to all of that. And it's the servant leadership, right?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Mhm.
Exactly. I mean, and I think like for young catchers, like that's something they need to learn. Like
Yeah.
your number one responsibility to help your team is to make sure your pitchers are they're taken care of. And
Yeah.
I know for me as a catcher, that was hard because I love to hit.
Yeah.
But I can add more value to my team if I can help maximize the potential of every pitcher that we have on our staff.
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF certified all in one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey, and you'll get that special offer. Absolutely. What about plyos? Like how much do you chase? I mean, not just sprint work, but jumping, change of direction, stuff like that.
We do them a lot. When I say a lot, we'll do them a couple times, 2, 3 times a week, 3 times a week during the off season. Historically catchers aren't fast, but
Mhm.
they have to be quick.
Yeah.
And since this audience is kind of geared more towards younger catchers on this, like seriously, jumping rope, I think is probably one
Yeah.
of the best things kids can do. It's going to help with their footwork throwing to the bases. It's going to help with their footwork moving laterally, trying to block the ball and stuff like that. So it doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be crazy. They don't need to be jumping on like 60-inch boxes. It's
Yeah.
just keep it simple, keep it short, but quick, like really quick. Like um, some of the things I used to like to do as a catcher was just I would draw like a little T on the ground and you just get your feet going, up forward and
Yeah.
back, side. And I felt like that stuff translated really well behind the plate when I was doing
Mhm.
my footwork to the bases.
I always love just anything that's like a ground to standing transition. Like let's be real, good catchers are good at rolling around the dirt. Like I love like rollover get up and goes.
Yep,
Obviously things like Turkish get ups and arm bars and stuff like that. It's just it gives them like the ability to interact with the ground a little bit better. And obviously it plays into plyos as well. So
I
um,
agree. Those are great.
let's talk about how you approach developing a young catcher. They're training their in-season work between in-season and off-season because they're obviously very different dynamics. But like, what kind of maintenance work are you doing with these young players if they're catching 2 or 3 games a week? Like, is it just done in the warm-ups of game days? Is it like a daily thing where it takes that kind of repetition? Off-season, obviously, there's a lot of frequency, I guess, that goes into it.
So with the off season, I kind of give them a break, like especially early on. Like the focus for the demographic that we're working with is, like I said, middle school to high school.
Yeah,
Is we would just try to get them stronger. So
yeah,
that's kind of the low hanging fruit for them at that time of the year, and then they will start to get a little bit busier once guys start throwing and they
yeah,
need to catch pens. Which I think is the best way to do it. I mean, other than
yeah.
catching a game, catching a bullpen is one of the best things you can do. That's why I never understood like a lot of catchers they won't wear a mask or they don't
Yeah.
they don't gear up. Like I always like to gear up because like I said earlier, like blocking was probably one of the hardest things for me to kind of translate from practice
Mhm.
to a game. And so doing all those things. So but we don't really start doing kind of skill work on the catching side until
Mhm.
closer to the season. Once the season starts, we'll do like habituals. Where we'll do it. We'll kind of sprinkle in before practice. 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes. And I usually like to kind of, it depends on who we have. Like if we have 3 or 4 guys and they all kind of struggle with blocking, or maybe the last game that they had, they really didn't block well. That's what we're going to go to. But it's not a ton of volume because again, a lot of their time spent in practice. I mean, pitchers have to pitch, and so they're going to be down
Yeah.
there catching bullpens throughout the game. So we're not beating them up, during practice, working on skill specific stuff.
Yeah.
But we definitely dedicate like 10 to 15 minutes a day at practice, just working on the skills they need to. I always say do a little bit a lot. I think that's the
Yeah.
most important. I think a lot of kids, parents of young kids, it's like they want to do lessons and they want to do all
Yeah.
this stuff, but they come in once a week. It's like that's not really helping. Like
Yeah.
you're doing a little bit every day, that's really going to translate well.
What about the throwing aspect of things? Like we talked a lot about like receiving, blocking, all that stuff. Like people forget catchers throw more than anybody on the field. Maybe they're not high intense throws all the time, but like we both know that they're going to throw down to second, 8 or 9 times a game and like let it eat. And there's probably going to be a couple back picks. There's probably going to be 12 to 15 near max effort throws every single day. And sometimes they're not going to be super warm for him as well. Like A, what's your take on volume management? And B, like how much are you really attacking arm speed with those guys once they're in season? Like we see tons of guys that have plyo programs now and all that stuff, but where's your head at?
So in the season, I kind of listen to what's going on with their arm because, like you just touched on, like they are throwing a lot. So sometimes their arms are getting tired. So to me, during season, it's just like let's just maintain what we have. But in the off season, I think that's a great time once they kind of have some downtime, maybe a month, to really put in high gear, just like a pitcher would. So I think so we do some plyos with our catchers, but mostly my favorite thing to do is long toss. I think
Yeah.
that if they can get some distance. When I talk about throwing, I like to break it down into four components. So I look at footwork. So we really need to dial in their footwork, make sure they understand how to create momentum, get momentum going towards the base they're throwing to. After that, there's transfer, and I like to kind of work on these things individually and then kind of pull them together. And so how well are we getting the ball out of our mitt into our throwing hand and getting it out of our hand to throw it down to the base. And then there's arm strength, and like I said, that we kind of work on that independently. So, if in season a guy's arm is feeling fine, then we'll do long toss. We'll do it once, maybe maximum twice a week. And then there's control. Like when you throw a ball 127 feet down to second base, like it can't, like if you're missing up by the infielder's head, that's not a good throw. Like it has to be down by his knees, ankles, and so really having an emphasis on catch play.
Mhm.
I always like to say aim small, miss small. So
Yep.
make sure that you're aiming at a target on their chest. I like to say chest side, glove side, and then kind of move it around, but make sure that you can throw the ball. I feel like that's why a lot of catchers throw good BP. It's a short arm
Mhm.
action,
That's a good
and they've
point.
really got to control the baseball when they throw it. And so I like to kind of work on all four of those things kind of separately, and then I like to
Mhm.
kind of pull it all together and make sure that they can do that. But um, I mean, as we touched on earlier, like a catcher that can throw is gonna really help a team win games,
Yeah.
especially at kind of high school and middle school level.
Absolutely. So, we've hit all things physical. Now we should probably talk on the mental, the interpersonal aspect of it. Like, what are some ways that young catchers can build trust with their pitchers and just improve their game calling and how they manage a pitching staff?
The one thing I always tell our kids is just watch baseball. Like a
Yeah.
lot of kids, they don't watch it. A lot of kids love baseball. As a kid, I loved watching it. I loved
Yeah.
just studying it. I was a huge Ivan Rodriguez fan. So
Yeah.
anytime he was catching, I would watch him. I would try to mimic what he was doing. As I got to pro ball, I could have been better at this. One of my teammates who ended up actually managing in the big leagues, Jace Tingler, he was really good about sitting next to our manager and asking questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes our manager, he was a little intimidating, and I was never really comfortable going up to him and asking questions, but I think just asking questions to your coaches about what are you seeing, with at the youth levels and high school levels, like some coaches call pitches, sometimes they let the player do it. But if a coach is calling the pitches, try to get on the same page, like find out what is it that you're doing and like why are you
Yeah.
in these pitches. I just don't think that a lot of kids are studying the game as much as they should be. And I think that's a big transition. I tell my kids this because like, hey, after like baseball's fun. I think all kids
Yeah.
start because they enjoy it, they love it, they're probably pretty good at it. But as you start to get older, I kind of look at it as like middle school. You now you kind of have to start being like a student of the game. You have to
Yeah.
kind of start understanding the nuance a little bit more. You need to know where to go on a bunt defense. You need to understand like what roles and responsibilities are on first and third defense. Like all of these things really start to matter. I think that there's been so much, and this isn't just with catching, but with the game in general. There's been, Augie Garrido used to have a famous saying. He used to say, you got to be a ball player before you can be a prospect. I feel like so many players are so caught up in like exit velo or throwing
Mhm.
hard instead of like, man, you really just need to learn how to play the game first. You and I and others do our best to help with those exit velocities and those throwing velocities. And, we can help some, but, some of these kids are just blessed. But I feel like
Yeah.
almost every kid, every player, if they have a growth mindset, they can become a really good player, but they have to they need to be inquisitive. They need to be
Mhm.
asking questions and just be curious about what can I do to become a better player? Because there are so many soft skills that go into being a good catcher or being a good player that I
Yeah.
don't feel like get the recognition they need. And I just that's been the one thing that's bummed me out about coaching the last 5 to 10 years is just I used to love doing that as a player. I think it's what made me a pretty good player. And there's just been such an emphasis put on other parts of the game that I still think are
Yeah.
great and important, but it's as much an art as it is a science. And I feel like the science has gotten most of the love in the last 5 to 10 years.
I think you nailed it. And as you were starting to talk about it, one of the things that rang true in the back of my head is like you talk about like the idea of reading swings, right? Like a lot of that has been thrown out the window as we've seen the era of like, here's the pitch grade for this slider. It's your best pitch. Throw it as much as you can. Like you throw your
Mhm.
best pitches more. So it kind of has gotten away from the idea of I don't want to say sequencing, but like catchers actually having an active role. Like I think we see a lot more where it's like just follow what's on the wristband, regardless of level, call this. And you kind of take away some of, the game calling aspect of the reading swings and also kind of like the pitcher and catcher figuring things out together.
Right. One thing I see at our levels, again, I'm working with, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, is like I'll get blown up by a foul. It's like he's clearly late or he's fouling it off, way off to the side. And then the next kid pitch they calls like a curveball or a changeup. It's like,
Mhm.
dude, what are you doing? Like you're
Yeah.
you're speaking up his bat. So using those opportunities to kind of teach the kids
Yeah.
because a lot of times they just don't really know what's going on. And that's our job. That's our job to coach them on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, catching's it's about a lot. It's right. It's toughness. It's getting, physically beaten up on a little bit. It's leadership, it's adversity. How do you train the mental side of catching? Like what advice do you give to your 13-year-old catchers?
I think honestly, I think it starts. I think a lot of these kids just kind of weed themselves out a little bit, and I don't,
Mhm.
and I don't mean that to sound harsh, but I mean it is a physically demanding position. And
Yeah.
when you go down to block a ball, you're trying to block with your chest protector, but every once in a while, it'll get you on your wrist, and
Yeah.
a kid will know really quickly whether that's the position they want to be or not.
Yeah.
But if they stick with it, just talking to them, kind of pumping them up, making sure they understand like how important their
Mhm.
role is on that team. I think that, like I said earlier, like I think that once you catch, it's really hard to go somewhere else because you're
Yeah.
just not involved in it's like you're playing a different game.
Yeah.
Like when you're standing in the outfield, and there's no offense to the out, I mean outfielders have a critical role as well. But it's just you're not able to just focus on you or your bat because there's so many things in front of you. So just try to get them to understand the importance of their role and responsibility on the team is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond the physical tools, what are some of your more maybe overlooked soft skills that you see in the elite catchers that maybe the average ones don't have? What's the X factor, right?
Honestly, I think it's the same thing that attracts us to people that we meet in our life, right?
Yeah,
Their ability to kind of communicate
yeah,
with different types of people. When they walk in a room, they kind of the energy shifts. I think that really, really good catchers, they have the ability to do that because they have to, right? Like I don't know him, but I've heard a million stories about him. Like to go from catching Greinke to Verlander to Scherzer, like a catcher that's going to do that and kind of mix between different personalities, like you almost kind of have to be a chameleon. So I think it's one of the big reasons why so many former catchers make big league managers
100%.
is you have to be able to communicate, you have to be able to adapt, you have to be able to really try to bring the most out of each pitcher on your staff. And I think the ones that get it, like the ones that are really excel, aside from their physical skills, of course, are those soft skills of being able to just draw out what makes each pitcher good. I think
Yeah.
and one of the things I always say about baseball is like, because when my brother passed away, I was like depressed. I mean, it was hard. And then I look back at my career and I was like, what was this? What was this all about? Like, it's not like surfing or tennis or golf where I can just go do it and, go get in a lineup or, go play competitive tennis or something like that. It's like, once you're done with baseball, unless you're going to play in the men's league, which I'm not going to go do, it's just like, so it's like, what did I learn from all this? What did I get from this? And baseball and catching taught me to do that, and I think
Mhm.
when we first met, you said paid me a very nice compliment. I still remember it was, you're like, I bet you're the kind of guy that could just strike up a conversation with somebody in an elevator. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I do it all the time. Uh, but I think I learned that from catching. I
Yeah.
think a catcher, you have to do that. I vividly remember, pulling one of my teammates behind the dugout in college because, he just was struggling and our teammates were just being really hard on him. And I didn't know this then, you connect the dots later. You don't connect the dots in the moment, but it was my ability to be able to kind of see that and know that like I can't have this conversation with this guy in front of his teammates. We need to go
Yeah.
over off the side. And he went out for the next 2 or 3 innings and shoved. So but I think that's really what this is all about with baseball is your these skills that are going to serve you beyond just playing baseball. It's going to serve you in life. I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it. Like the former catchers becoming major league managers. I think utility players always work out well. They're always servant leadership, right? They're always someone that was, if you're a utility player, you're filling in for whatever starter needs the day off, or you're coming in to play defense in the eighth inning or something like that. And catchers, obviously, you're serving a pitching staff way ahead of your own needs. It goes a long way for, I think, helping a lot of those struggles with, when people, try to transition from playing to coaching and they don't realize it's not about them anymore. It's about the athlete.
Right.
So I think you nailed it. All right, man, you survived the gauntlet of catching questions. So we got to go lightning round. This is the fun part. All right. So you have two young boys, appropriately named Easton and Camden. Um, Youth baseball is a hot topic on our podcast. I know you're around it, you coach it, and you've seen it through multiple, I guess, generations at this point. What's your take on the youth baseball landscape right now, both as a coach and a dad?
I think I have more, I don't say appreciation is the right word, but I guess I understand now more why parents are the way they are. I
Mhm,
started coaching, I didn't have kids yet.
mhm.
And so I was very good at like, I always like Mike Matheny. I don't know if you ever read into the Matheny Manifesto, but he kind of opens that book up with like, I guess it was like a speech he'd wrote and written and read to the parents. And he said, I always said if I was going to coach youth baseball, it'd be a team of orphans because he didn't want to deal with the parents. And so I was very good at kind of putting up those barriers before I
Mhm.
had kids. But now as a parent, I can empathize a bit more. Like, and I'm sure you can too. Like as a parent, like we want our kids to do well.
Yeah,
Um, and we want them to do well now. But I think the biggest thing that I have the experience to be able to kind of take a step back and look at is I don't really care if Easton and Camden are very good in little league. Like I want them to be, and I think it's good for them, and it's good for their confidence. But if this is something they choose to do for as long as they can do it, what I'm trying to do is build something that, where they're going to they're going to start seeing the fruits of their labor later. Because I mean, you know as well as I do, and I've heard you talk about this. Like, yeah, I can't remember. You'll have to correct me because I heard this on your podcast about like something about there was like a room full of 50 kids and like or 50 pro guys and like I
oh
think
yeah,
there's a handful that played in the area code games or something like
yeah.
that.
It
Is that
was, it was, it was. I think it was Sam Folk was like the only one out of like 40 something guys that came in that day. It was
yeah?
eye-opening.
So having that perspective and knowing like, okay, well, it's not really how well they're doing now. It's am I building them not only this like the hard skills they need, but like the soft skills that are not just going to serve them as baseball players, but as humans. That is a big one. And it is hard. Like when I'm sitting here like on my soapbox saying it's not, it is hard. Like if
Mhm.
my kids strike out, like I'm bummed as much as any other dad's going to be bummed, but I feel like I'm able to at least take a step back and say like, this isn't the end of the world. And so I
Yeah,
think so many parents today are just trying to control things for their kids. And I think that they're doing more harm than good and they're well intended.
yeah,
But that's, I think that's the biggest thing that I see. And just the competitiveness in travel balls, like it's just off the charts. It's like, guys, this is not that important. I
yeah,
just think like the way I see with pitch counts with kids, I've seen kids, they'll throw 60 pitches on Saturday and they'll come back and throw them, 75 on Sunday. I mean, all the research is out there. I mean, you talk
yeah.
about it ad nauseum. I mean, I hear it all the time, but yet these these coaches and these parents. I don't know why that is, other than it has to be because they want them to be really good now, and I
Yeah.
just don't think that's the right. I don't think that's the right message. I think that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And like I said, even if it does work out, I always tell kids it's like he had to end for Derek Jeter, and he
Yeah.
was 40 when he retired. So he's
Mhm.
still got hopefully 40 plus more years of his life. Like
Mhm.
you've got to learn skills that are going to serve you beyond just baseball.
Yeah.
And I think if you really pay attention and you look at what's important and you have good coaches and good people around you, baseball will teach you those skills. And that's what I love most about it is
Yeah.
it's just like it's a vessel, you know?
Yeah, I think, training sports, it's all about learning how to fail with no consequences, right? Because if you haven't learned how to fail and you're 18, you go off in the real world, you might fail and really struggle. Like
Right.
sometimes it's good to strike out 3 times and realize that the world didn't end. Like I always talk about failing forward. That's a line I use a lot with our girls. Like it's totally fine to stumble. It's how you respond with all of it. So those are good feedback. So what are your thoughts about the automated ball strike system? They're trying it out this spring training. We've got about a week under our belt. What's your take?
Yeah, look, I like that Major League Baseball is trying to make changes.
Mhm.
I think if it ever gets to the point where it's all automated, like there's no umpire,
Yeah,
I think that'd be a huge bummer because all
yeah,
these things that we're talking about with receiving just go out the
yeah,
window. It like it does like you're trying to get like the next Mike Piazza. Like who cares
yeah,
how he catches? Let's just have him hit, right? And
yeah.
I guess throw. So it should be interesting. I've watched a couple of games with it. I actually watched a spring training game. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago
Mhm.
with you guys, with the Yankees,
Yeah,
and I think somebody did it, ended up getting a walk, and the next guy had like a 2-run bomb or something like
yeah.
that. So those parts are fascinating. It puts a lot of pressure on the umpire, that's for sure. But I don't know. I will be bummed if they take it a step further and it becomes all automated because
Yeah,
that just kills receiving. So much of the work I
yeah,
do with catchers is on receiving,
yeah,
and it feels like you can really change a game that way. And to take that
100%.
out, huge bummer.
Well, I don't think the hitters want it as much as think they want it. Like there are going to be some really weird strike calls that they're not, the curveball that catches just the front of the plate.
Right.
And yeah, I'm not sure it's not something we're all ready for. Another question for you. Favorite book in the baseball landscape? If you could recommend something to parents, kids, coaches, must read. I know you've read a ton in this world over the years. One that comes to mind?
I mean, it's the mental game of baseball.
Yeah,
It's like a staple, and I know it's probably a generic answer, but I
that's all
actually
right.
we got to meet Harvey Dorfman when I was in Instructs after my first year, and
That's awesome.
it's funny, like sometimes you get, I mean, you seem like you're always
Mhm.
on, but like most people, normal people, they get motivated and they're motivated for like a couple days or a couple weeks and then
Mhm.
they kind of lose it. I remember meeting him and thanking him for coming out and
Mhm.
just feeling super inspired and motivated for like that whole off season. Like it really had an impact on me. And I mean, I read that book when I was 12 and I've read it many times over, after that. And I'm trying to get Easton to read it, but I
Mhm.
think he's a little too young still. He's got to be ready for that. But
Yeah,
um, I think that, and then I think Heads Up Baseball is a good one with
yeah.
Ken Ravita. I mean, him and Augie worked so closely together, and
Yeah.
I just feel like the guy was awesome. He was such a rock star.
Love
Sad that
those.
guys are gone.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Last but not least, you have an awesome catching course that's available. Builds on some of the stuff we talked about. Maybe tell our listeners about it, what your impetus was for creating it and what people can expect from it, most importantly, where they could find it.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. So I actually created during COVID. I was kind
Mhm.
of freaking out. The gyms were closing down. I said, I've been wanting to do this for years. I think you'd even encouraged me to do it
Yeah.
at one point. But it's basically from soup to nuts, everything you need to know about catching, kind of to the population we're talking about, kind of little league up through kind of the high school. We go over everything. We go over, tag plays,
Yeah.
bunt plays, receiving, blocking stances, all kind of everything we kind of touched on today. And so the name of my brick and mortar business is called Paradigm Sport.
Mhm.
But the online course is on the Players Paradigm. So they can just go to thePlayersParadigm.com and it's on there to purchase.
I love that. And I love it too, because it's something like you don't necessarily need a coach to go through it with you. Like a parent and his son could kind of go through it, work on some stuff together. Like it's almost got like a curriculum feel to it, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is like oftentimes, especially with the high school level, like as well as I do, like it's hard to do when you're doing team practice, it's hard to do like one-on-one work with
Yeah.
someone. And oftentimes at the high school level, most coaches haven't caught or don't know anything about
Yeah.
catching. So
Just go,
for
just go catch
really
bullpens, right? Yeah.
that's kind of them. It's like, hey, here's 39 drills that we have in here.
Yep.
Just like teach, learn them. They're pretty easy. Just learn them and then just give them to the kids and they can go do that. And like I said, like doing a little bit a lot goes a long way. So if the kids are doing these drills for 10 or 15 minutes a day, I think it'll really help them.
I love that. And we'll make sure we link to it in the show notes. Joey's on social media. It's at Paradigm Sport on Instagram, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Beautiful. Good stuff there. Work with some amazing big league talent out there. You got a nice surfing population as well. So folks are in Santa Cruz, definitely check out the brick and mortar location. Joey, you're the man. Known you for a long time, but it was cool to hone in on your specific niche on this conversation.
Eric, I appreciate everything you're not only doing for strength and conditioning, but you're doing for baseball. As a player, I always was trying to find, instructors that knew it, like really knew it. And from the moment I met you in 2011, like it was clear, like you were doing something different. And to see your evolution, to see you grow and do what you're doing it's been amazing. And honestly, man, it's inspiring. I mean, you've had more of an impact on my life than I think you know. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you letting me come on here and do this.
This is great, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
You got it.